Well, when I started this series of videos this week, I said that in many ways, some of the things that we see happening in the 1990s remind us of things that have happened before in the history of rock music. And we've seen a number of instances of that throughout the course of this week's lectures. But there's perhaps none that sticks out any more obviously than the one that we're going to talk about now. And that's the rise of teen idols during the 90s. That is, artists that were designed specifically to appeal to a teen audience, and often an audience of teen girls. So maybe this first group that I talk about doesn't quite fit that, but you'll see that it sort of goes in that direction, so stick with me here. When I first start talking about Boyz II Men, a group that came out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and was signed to the Motown label. Now, in the 80s, as we got into the 80s, remember Michael Jackson had left Motown, and Motown was maybe in a little bit of a doldrums, but Boyz II Men and the success that they had in the early 90s really revitalized Motown. And they had that success by returning to earlier styles of rhythm and blues, and especially Motown kind of music. So we're talking about the influence of groups like the Temptations, the Four Tops, even maybe to a certain extent early doo-wop groups with this rich harmony singing, arrangements, dance steps, this kind of thing. Boyz II Men really brought all of that to bear. They would say they were influenced by other groups from the 1980s like the New Edition and New Kids on the Block, both groups that came from Boston and were produced by Maurice Starr. In 1991, they came out with an album called Cooley High Harmony, which went to number 3 in the pop charts, number 1 in the black charts, and number 7 in the UK. And then they were teamed with Kenneth Babyface Edwards for a song called End of the Road. Oh boy, was this a big song for them. 1992, number 1 in the pop charts, number 1 in the black charts, number 1 in the UK charts, and it appeared in the film Boomerang, starring Eddie Murphy. This song, End of the Road, became one of those kind of slow dance numbers that many people have told me was their like prom song or whatever. It's one of those kind of make-out songs. If you don't know what that is, go look that up on the internet. But a really sort of classic tune that really goes back to all of the old values of harmony singing, R&B ballads, this kind of thing. We're talking about 1992. Well, the success of Boyz II Men during the first half of the 90s really influenced a lot of folks, and the idea was that if we could have a Boyz II Men that was maybe a little bit more oriented toward teen girls, that might be a great thing. And so we get what we call the boy bands, and the first 2 of those important boy bands are put together by a guy by the name of Lou Pearlman, who was one of these manager types, who sort of put everything together and sort of found auditioned people to be in the group because he had an idea of how it was going to be. Not unlike Bob Marcucci back in Philadelphia when we talk about the teen idols in the early 60s, or somebody maybe like Larry Parnes in London during the early 1960s, sort of constructing these sort of teen idol kinds of things. In this case, it was the boy bands, and Lou Pearlman, sort of based in Orlando, Florida, his first big boy band was the Backstreet Boys. And these guys in 1997 had a number 4 album with the self-titled album Backstreet Boys, number 12 in the UK with songs like Quit Playing Games with My Heart, number 2 on both sides of the Atlantic, and As Long As You Love Me, number 4 here, number 3 in the UK. And then they really brought it with Millennium in 1999, a number 1 album on the pop charts, number 2 in the UK charts. Well, it wasn't long before there was dissension in the Backstreet Boys ranks because they started to get a little bit jealous that Lou Pearlman wasn't spending as much time on them as they thought their careers and their success deserved, because he was starting to spend time on yet a second boy band that he was developing. It turned out that that boy band was called NSYNC. And now the next little bit of this is going to be the sort of the the presence of so many members of the new Mickey Mouse Club in this whole scene from the late 1990s. Now, I'm not quite sure if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, but J.C. Chasez and, of course, Justin Timberlake had both been members of the new Mickey Mouse Club. That album, In Sync, self-titled, 1998, goes to #2 on the strength of the song, God Must Have Spent a Little More Time on You. But then they really hit it in 2000 with No Strings Attached, #1 pop album, #14 in the UK. And of course, Justin Timberlake goes on to be one of the most important performers, both as an actor and as a recording artist in the entertainment industry today. A fantastic talent, and it all kind of, well, I wouldn't say it all sort of starts with In Sync, because after all, he had been in the new Mickey Mouse Club. But these were bands that were all designed to get the young girls screaming after them, and that's exactly what they did. They were teen idols, pop stars in that direction. Well, at about the same time, over in the UK, there was a management team that decided that they wanted to put together a group that kind of did the same kind of thing these boy bands were doing, but they were going to do it with a girl band. That girl band was the Spice Girls. In fact, like the Ramones had done earlier, each one sort of like taking a sort of a different sort of first name and the last name being Ramones. Now we have different, all 5 of the women in this group have got a name. So we've got Scary Spice, Sporty Spice, Baby Spice, Ginger Spice, and Posh Spice. They're like little action figures already, right, or dolls. I always tell my students, I call myself Old Spice, right? So these are the Spice Girls. They initially have their first hit in the second half of 1996 and sort of launch what came to be called in the media Spice Mania. Well, fantastic. I mean, this is all about marketing, and the Spice Girls are enormously successful in the UK. Their song Wannabe goes to #1 in the UK and goes to #1 in 31 countries. Golly, that is some kind of success, the Spice Girls. And of course, the imaging of the girls, the fact that they're the women, the fact that they are, you know, beautiful, and there's just, you know, there's what's not to like about the Spice Girls. The U.S. breakthrough for the group came with the release in this country of Wannabe, which went to #1 in early 1997. They followed with the album Spice, #1 on both sides of the Atlantic in 1997. Later that year with the album Spice World, #3 in this country, #1 in the UK, on the strength of the song Spice Up Our Life. You can see this Spice thing comes back even more than Smurfs in the Smurfs. You've got every imaginable use of the word spice in all of this. Anyway, fantastic success. The Spice Girls, In Sync, Backstreet Boys. We're really talking about a world of, you know, teen idols, prepackaged, no matter how good the songs are, no matter how talented the people really are. I'm not casting aspersions on that. I'm just saying, look at the machinery that's making this thing go. It should be familiar to you. It's not that much different than what made young Michael Jackson a star when he's with the Jackson 5, Donny Osmond, David Cassidy, going all the way back to teen idols like Fabian and Frankie Avalon. So this is a very familiar kind of approach. Well, what then starts to happen at the end of the 1990s are 2 women who had been in the new Mickey Mouse Club, who now became almost kind of the twin poles of the female teen idol. We're talking about Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera. Britney Spears' 1999 album, Baby One More Time, #1 in this country, #2 in the UK, produced by Max Martin. That title song, Baby One More Time, not only goes to #1, but the video features Britney Spears in this sort of skimpy schoolgirl outfit, which was guaranteed to not only draw her female fans, but keep a lot of male fans watching as well. Even guys who hated the song love to watch Britney dance. She follows up in 2000 with Oops, I Did It Again, #1 in this country, #2 in the UK. Britney is, her competition at that point is her former colleague at the new Mickey Mouse Club, Christina Aguilera. Her self-titled album from 1999 goes to #1 on the strength of the #1 hit Genie in a Bottle and What a Girl Wants, both of those #1 in this country. Again, teen girls were the were the target of almost all these artists I've been talking about in this particular video. And I want you to take just a minute to compare the gender imaging we have here with Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, the Spice Girls, what's going on, with what we talked about just in the last video, which was the female singer-songwriters. I think a lot of people who were fans of the female singer-songwriters would have said about these teen idols, and especially the sort of suggestive, sort of almost soft porn sort of stripper mentality of some of these videos, that that it was objectifying women, that it was exactly what the singer-songwriters were, female singer-songwriters were trying to get away from, was exactly the kind of thing that Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, and the Spice Girls were exploiting. So you really had these kinds of two approaches to sort of imaging of a female artist in popular music at this time, and they're present at the same time, and there's certainly a certain amount of tension between the two of them. Well, turning away now from these teen idols, it may seem strange that disco should return in the 1990s, but in many ways, disco does return in the 1990s. In fact, there's a direct link between disco and what we'll call electronic dance music, and that's what we'll turn to in the next video.